Hey everybody, welcome back. It's good to be with you in the virtual world. This is going to be lesson 32. That's based on chapter 11 of Toliver's Secret. Hope that the work is going well, that if you're having any confusions or comments that you're posting them so that we can continue to improve. I think this lesson will be pretty straightforward, pretty brief, and possibly the quickest video we've done so far. So let's dive right in. All right. Like I said, we are starting with diving into reading lesson number 32 today, which is reading lesson 32, which is connected to chapter 11 of Toliver's Secret. Pages 135 142, very brief chapter, and our main objective today is going to be describing a character using specific details in a text. Characters are the reason why we read books. We either love them or hate them. We feel connected to the characters and the stories that they're telling, the things they're trying to accomplish. And good readers are able to use the details that the author gives in the text to understand their characters better. That way they can make connections to them and learn from them, or decide that they don't want to be like them and not act in a certain way. It also helps you understand the story if you know why characters are doing what they're doing and what kind of people that they are. Okay. So by the end of the lesson today, we're going to meet two new characters in this chapter, and both of them are unnamed characters. There's a tall man and there's a blacksmith. That's what we know about them. We're going to choose one of them. We're going to describe what they are like and include why they are important to the story. We're going to make sure we have some details to support that, and then lastly, we're also going to tell what we learned about Ellen from her meeting with these two men. We'll talk about this a little bit further on in the lesson, but a lot of times when you guys so far have been asked to describe characters, you've been describing some main characters in the story. In this case, we're going to be asking to describe some characters that are not main characters. And as you read more and more complicated texts, there are going to be more and more side characters, and authors put side characters in for a reason, so that we can understand the story better, or someone else's perspective a little bit better. A lot of times we think that they're in here for no reason, but they are. And so to become better at describing characters, we have to become better at focusing on those side characters, those characters that aren't quite as important to the main storyline, but still have some importance for being there. Let's dive into our vocabulary really quickly. Just 4 words today. The first word is wager, which means to gamble or risk a thing or amount on an event with uncertain outcomes. So when you bet someone something, I bet you can't do that. I bet you $20 you can't do that. That's a wager. You're just gambling on a certain event happening or not happening. Okay. And the second word is bellows. It's a bag that can be expanded to draw air in and squeeze it says forth out air, so it'd be force air out. If you've watched cartoons, in this chapter we hear about blacksmith as one of the characters, and they are often in cartoons shown as these big burly men who are pushing up and down this big fan-like looking thing to make the flames hot, and then they have a hammer that they're smashing away on something. The bag that goes up and down, that's the bellows. It blows air out to keep fire going. The third word is tongs. It's a tool that has 2 arms held together by a hinge that is used to pick up objects. You most likely see tongs at a salad bar, where you're using to pick up salads, and you might use it to pass out other kind of things, but yeah, tongs. In this case with the blacksmith, the tongs are what he uses to pick up hot metal so that it doesn't burn his hands. And then the last word is bound, and that word means held to by law or duty. And so sometimes when we hear the word bound, you might think of like bound and gagged, where someone's wrists are tied up or ankles are tied up, or bound as in like jumping. But this is actually neither of those terms. It just means that if something is bound to happen, that means that the law it's likely to happen no matter what. The law or a duty is connecting something to somebody that they have to do. All right. Cool. To get our brains moving in the direction of today's lesson, In the very beginning of the chapter today, you notice that Ellen is scared on the road, and she uses her religious teachings, the Bible readings that her grandfather gave to her, to help her feel better. And just to put yourself in her shoes for a second, what helps you when you're afraid? Pause the video now, take a minute or two to answer that. And now that you're back, again, as always with these activations, your answers are going to be very different, and a lot of them I'm sure make a lot of sense. When I'm often afraid, what I do is I have a checklist reminder in my head of things that I've done before that have been very scary, and I just remind myself that I've done those things in the past and I was fine. And so that things that I might be a little bit nervous about in the future, I can remind myself that I've been nervous before, but I've succeeded and I've survived. So that's something that works for me. Maybe you have something different. And when we have our Zoom meetings, maybe that's something that we can talk about. Awesome. So let's actually dive into the lesson today, our objective. And as always, if you take a quick look at the exit ticket, this is what we're doing. We're going to be choosing one of these two men. We're going to describe the characters, and then tell why they're important to the story, giving details from the text to support a response, as always. And then we're going to tell what we learned about Ellen from her meeting with these two men. In order to do that, I'm going to just give a very quick overview and reminder of how we describe characters and some skills that we can use to make sure that we describe them well. So we'll start with this. So this is our goal today. We're going to describe a character by using specific details in a text. Some words that we need to know. Most of us already know these words and we're very familiar with them, but just a quick review. A character is a person, usually in a story. I put usually because sometimes it's not a person. It can be an animal, depending on the story, or sometimes even an object, but usually it's just a person in a story. Character traits, this one is sometimes confusing, is a word that describes someone's personality. A lot of times students get character traits and character feelings mixed up. A feeling is something that someone feels for a short amount of time. It's not something that they're feeling often. A character trait is a word that describes someone's personality, something that they're usually like. And then last, what we're going to be doing today is the word infer, which means to make a smart guess. Also usually using what you already know, your schema and a text, but sometimes you're inferring without those things. And so that's what infer means. How to do that? We're going to infer some character traits. Here's what we do. We can notice how or what do they act, how do they think, what do they say, and how do they feel about a couple different things. Others, about themselves, or about their situation. Right? So all of these things, noticing how they act, think, say, or feel about others, themselves, or the situation, reveals different things about a character. If they act one way toward themselves, but act differently toward others, that tells us that they might not be the most honest of people. If they think positively about themselves and they also think positively about others, they might be a very positive person. And also, when we're talking about their situation, a lot of times our characters get into difficult problems. We can learn a lot about them by how they act, think, say, and feel about their situation. We learned from Hatchet that Brian was started off as a very unconfident person. I'm not thinking of a word right now that means unconfident, but just not confident, because he didn't think that he could succeed in surviving. But toward the end, he built his confidence because he viewed his situation as not so bad. Even after a tornado and a moose attacked him, he's like, well, I just got to get my fire going again. So that shows that he's much more confident in his ability eventually. We can also take a look at how or what other characters act around them, how they act around them, what they think about that character, what they say, or what they feel about the character. And this is a little bit about what we're going to dive into today. Not only can we look at what characters are doing, we can also look at what other characters are saying or thinking or how they're acting toward that character to tell us more about them. A lot of times we learn even more about a person's character based on how other people act. And then finally, we take all the things that we've noticed in these directions, put them together, and make a smart guess. And that's all we can really do. The way authors reveal characters to us, we're never really going to know exactly what they're like. It's very rarely, as you guys are reading more complicated books, that the author's going to say, well, Ellen was a caring person. You have to make that smart guess and infer from what she's said, done, and what she's thought about. And one last thing. In order to be really good at this, we have to build your character trait vocabulary. Most of the time, when I'm working with you guys and other students, you are pretty good at this. You notice what characters are saying and what they're doing, and how they think about themselves or how they think about others, because you're doing it all day, every day with your friends and with your classmates and things like that. But then when it comes time to actually guess their character trait, a lot of times we're lacking the words to describe someone. We just don't have that many words in our vocabulary to say it. So there's hundreds and hundreds of words that describe people. In the lesson materials, I'm going to post a couple different resources where you can see a bunch of different character traits that you can use, and hopefully just start building your character trait vocabulary. That's really the only way to get better at this, is to learn more and more words that are more specific about how a character acts or thinks or feels. Yeah. And then finally, when we've done those things, we've inferred their character traits, we go into the aspect of where we're going to actually describe the character. And just very quickly, when we describe them, we describe their identity and their relationships, who they are and how they're connected to other people in the story. Just what we talked about, we're going to describe their actions and their traits, what kind of person they are. Their feelings and their motivations, what they enjoy doing, why they're doing what they're doing, whatever it is. And then this is the one we're actually going to focus on a bit today, because with our main characters, the importance of the story is often very clear. Ellen is important to the story because the whole story is connected to her mission, trying to deliver this bread to her grandfather's friend. It's really easy to tell why she's important to the story. Some of the side characters that we meet, we don't. It's a lot harder to find out why they're actually in the story to begin with. Would the Ellen be successful or unsuccessful without them? And so here are some things that you can think about to help discover the character's importance to the story. The first thing is, what do they reveal about a main character? Authors put other characters in the book to show us what the main character is like, or a main character is like. When oftentimes a character, if we're trying to show that they are evil, will show that there's another person in the story that character treats very, very badly. So we know, wow, must be a bad guy. He just chopped that person's head off. And so that person was in the story to show how evil that bad guy was. And so this is something to be looking for when we're thinking about this. What do these two men reveal about Ellen through there? And also, how do they affect the character trying to solve the problem? Okay. A lot of times in stories, the character is trying to solve a problem that either they've created or that's been put upon them, and the other characters either help them do it or they make it harder for them to do it. And that's why they're in the story. A lot of stories would be really, really boring if a character had a problem and then the first time they tried to solve it, they solved it. That'd be dumb. It'd be, oh, okay, story's over. Oftentimes, problems get more complicated, and so the author will introduce other characters to either add to the problem, make it harder, or take away from the problem, make it easier. The author actually gives us a really good example of this in Toliver's Secret. When Ellen got taken on the boat, the two soldiers there, Higgins was a really big help. He encouraged Ellen and gave her confidence and pushed her to believe in herself. Where the other one, Dobbs, scared the living bejesus out of her and made her job even harder. And so those two characters were in there to do different things. One was to make the problem harder for Ellen, and one was to make the problem easier. That's why the author put them in there. And so when we're thinking about why characters are important to the story, these are the two things that we should be thinking the most about. All right. Now that we've reviewed this, let's dive in. As always, we'll go through our thinking questions. When it's time to do your own thinking, I'll tell you to pause the video. You can do it on your own, and then when you come back, I'll share the thinking that I thought. While we're going through, we'll be breaking down separately the blacksmith and the tall man, so that when you do your exit ticket, no matter which one you choose, you'll have the information that you need to put together a good exit ticket. And when we do our exit ticket, I'll actually do both as well, so that you can check your work against that. Excellent. So, what do we know about the blacksmith and the tall man? This is speaking mostly to their identity, and we can dive into the kind of people that they are, but we'll save that a little bit for how they treat Ellen, because that'll tell us a little bit more about them. So, go ahead and pause the video, check your text, and I'll come back for number 1. All right, here we go. What do you know about the blacksmith and the tall man? I'm going to switch to camera view, dive into the text. They don't come in till about halfway through the chapter, on page 138. And so the first thing that we know about them is very clear. I mean, their names give away a lot. The blacksmith, right? So we know that he was a blacksmith. He worked at making metal objects for different people. And right now he's putting a horseshoe on a horse. But we find out a lot about him right here. It says, "What brings you here, boy?" he said sharply. "It's cold night to be out." "Oh, sir, I'm frozen into an icicle." "Step up to the fire then, but don't alarm the horse." And so this shows that he's a kind man. He didn't know Ellen from anybody, but he still says that she can come in and warm herself up. She's frozen, she needs help. Hey, we see that again later. I think something we can mention about him too is that this whole time he's working, he's covered with a coat of sooty cobwebs. Everything, this whole soot-covered room was filled with light. Everything is being used in this room. He's a very hard worker, and throughout the whole time, he's putting the shoe on the horse without being distracted by anything. And now for the tall man, we get a pretty good description of what he looks like here. I don't think we need to add all that, except for that he's very, very tall. But we get a description of his personality a bit here when he says, "He said nothing, but she could feel his sharp eyes look at her closely." And then down here, you can see what he's saying. He says, "Where did you come from? Never saw you before. Where are you from? You a bound boy there?" So repeatedly, the tall man is asking Ellen questions. So either he's a very curious person and just wants to know more about her, or he's a very suspicious person and is worried about what she's doing there. And so as we're reading this, we're not exactly sure which one it is, but we can tell that he asks a bunch of questions. And then even at the very end of the chapter, page 142, he keeps doing it. "Now, what's under your jacket, boy?" "It must be right valuable," said the man, "from the way you are hiding it." So even with some time passing, he continues to pester Ellen, trying to figure out what's under there. So again, he's either really curious or very suspicious about what she is doing in this part of town. So, bloop. Let's get back into our worksheet. And I'm going to separate this out. I'm going to start with blacksmith and then tall man. So we know the blacksmith is a hard-working smith who is kind. Throughout the whole chapter, he is putting the shoe on the horse without stopping. And he lets Ellen come in and warm herself by the fire, even though he didn't know her. Right. I'm gonna just separate this a little bit. The tall man. I'm actually gonna say he's mysterious. We don't learn a lot about him. But he is either very curious or very suspicious. He continuously asks Ellen questions about herself and what she has in her coat. So that's what we know about them. Again, we know a little bit more about what, especially the tall man. He got a very long description of what he looks like, but I don't think describing all of that is that important. When his whole description is kind of mysterious. He's got a scarf that goes over his face, so he's just kind of interesting. We don't really know a ton about them. We've answered a little bit about this already. For number 2, how did the blacksmith and the tall man treat Ellen? So take a moment now, remind yourselves of what you noticed, and then we'll dive into this when you're done pausing the video. Right. Well, we kind of already mentioned that with the first one. The blacksmith treated her kindly. He allowed her to come in. And then I think there's one other thing to notice about him. And that is on page 141. If you notice, the tall man right here, the tall man and the blacksmith are having a conversation. They're talking about Ellen and trying to figure out what's in her jacket. And the tall man says, "Perhaps he's a paymaster for the redcoats," said the big man. And then the blacksmith says, "Or a runaway thief." The tall man then asked, "Did you steal something from the redcoats?" But then the blacksmith says here, he just kind of grumbled and says, "Lots of stealing around here. Horses, saddles, blankets. You can't trust anyone these days, not since the British came. Now bring up the horse," he said to a man with a muffler. And so instead of like getting angry with Ellen and accusing her of stealing, he's kind of just saying, lots of people are stealing around here. The British came and things are in trouble. Like, things are not good right now. So he's not all that worried about Ellen. He treats her almost with some respect, or he honestly just kind of ignores her because he's got a job to do, which is very different from the way that the tall man treats her, because the tall man won't leave her alone and keep asking her questions. Right? So I'm going to mention that. The blacksmith, at first, treats Ellen very kindly and lets her come warm herself up by the fire. Later on, he mostly ignores her and seems to not be worried about what she is doing there. Right. The tall man, on the other hand, and we mentioned this before, he treats her suspiciously. He treats her with a lot of mistrust. He tries to figure out what she's doing. So he treats her with mistrust. He keeps asking her questions about who she is and what she's doing and what is under her jacket. And that's basically how he treats her. And I'm actually going to have us for number 3. We can kind of skip over it because we answered it in number 2. What did the men think about Ellen? They both, one ignores her, and the second one thinks it keeps asking her questions. So actually, let's take a second now to actually answer this. What do the men think about Ellen? The blacksmith, we said before, ignores her, and so we have to kind of dive in. If he keeps asking her questions, the tall man, what must he think about Ellen? Take a moment now to answer about it to yourself. Now that you're back, as we saw mentioned in the text before, he must think she's some sort of spy or some sort of, like I said, paymaster for the redcoats. So that's why he's probably so suspicious, is because he thinks that she's a spy for the British or working for the British. So we can kind of just repeat what we said about the blacksmith. The blacksmith isn't all that worried about Ellen, but the tall man thinks she is likely a spy now he asks, did she steal something from the British? So we don't know which side that he's on yet. Is he happy that she stole something from the British, so he's a patriot? Or is he a loyalist with the British and asking her if he stole something so that she could be punished? Again, he's very mysterious. We don't actually know a lot about what his motivations are. But he probably thinks that she is some kind of spy. All right. And now, this gets to the last part of our exit ticket and also the last part of describing characters. Okay? The last part of describing characters is their importance to the story. Okay? And like we spoke before, what they reveal about a character or how they affect the character trying to solve the problem shows their importance. And so asking this question, what is the author saying about how Ellen has changed since the beginning of the book? That's what... I almost gave it away again. So you got to stop. Yeah. I'm going to give you a few minutes to think about it. So pause the video, write your thoughts down, and then we'll come back together. Okay. Now that you're back, the author has done this with many characters. But with these two, Ellen comes in because she needs to. And she is questioned. She's grilled, almost interrogated about what she has. But she doesn't give anything up. So it's showing that she is very, very committed to the cause and that she believes that she can do it. I'm going to show you one other point in the text for this chapter that I think doesn't directly connect to the characters, but reveals a lot about Ellen. It's on page 136. It says, nothing was going to stop her now that she was only half a mile from Mr. Shannon's tavern. This is showing that she has great determination, that she's not going to let anything stand in her way. In the very beginning of the book, she didn't think she could do this at all. She was upset with her grandfather for putting this on her. But now she is unwilling to stop for any reason, even if two very, very big, scary, grown men are asking her questions about what she's doing. And so I think the author is showing that Ellen is completely committed to completing her mission, no matter what. It's asking how she changed, which you say in the beginning of the book, she didn't think, she was upset that her grandfather, doesn't need to be capitalized, it's not his name, grandfather asked her to do this because she didn't think she would be able to. Now, she won't let anything stop her from delivering the bread. Even two very large, frightening, and mysterious grown men. Excellent. Great. So, now, with our exit ticket, the thinking questions that you answered, you can basically put together to do these things with either the blacksmith or the tall man. We can tell what the blacksmith does, add why they're important to the story. The one thing we did but didn't write down throughout here was the details to support our response. And so we're going to make sure that we have a good example for both of these. And then we'll be finished with our description. So I'm going to start with the blacksmith, just like I did here. And again, I'm doing both. You don't have to do both. You only have to do one. Describe one. But I'm going to describe both separately so that you can check your response against mine, no matter who you did. So, right, we know the blacksmith is hardworking, kind. So we're describing the blacksmith. We're describing what he's like. Throughout the whole chapter, he's putting the shoe on the horse without stopping. Let's let him come in and warm himself up. Great. Why is he important to the story? Again, this goes right into Ellen being completely committed. And so he's important to the story because he helps show that Ellen is fully committed to her mission because even though she is afraid, she doesn't let her fear stop her from continuing her job. And so now we can do a couple things. We can give evidence to support that he was kind, right? Oh, and we can also give evidence to support why he is important. So let's do the first. Again, we're going to take it right from the text. This is something that a lot of us need to be practicing. And so this is on page 138. Switch back to the camera real quick. Can get the underside of my chin there. It's not a pleasant look, I'm sorry. Step up to the fire then, but don't alarm the horse. As the evidence that I'm going to use to show that he was kind and allowed Ellen to come in and stand by the fire. On page 138, comma, blacksmith says, again, I'm looking back to make sure I get the exact words, step up to the fire then. And I can just use that. I don't even have to use the rest of because the horse doesn't have anything to do it. Excellent. Great. So we've proven that he was kind. We show why he's important. We've done our job here. Now, the tall man. Okay, what the character is like. So we did this here. This tall man is mysterious. Put that there. The tall man is mysterious. We don't learn a lot about him, but he is either very curious or very suspicious. He continually asks Ellen questions about herself and what she has in her coat. So to prove that, we should go find where it says it. And there's a bunch. I found 3 on page 139. Oh, I didn't go back to where I was supposed to. I'm sorry, guys. Well, let me give you this evidence. Then we can look back at the blacksmiths. Let's look at this right there. Where did you come from? Never saw you before. Where are you from? You a bound boy there. So, and also on page 140, I didn't mark it with my text, but right there. What's that under your coat? So to quote this, since it's in a couple different places, I'll show y'all how to do that. I've shown a few of this before. Oh, don't want to open that up. So on pages 139 and 140, tall man says, so we'll say asks, where are you from? And then since we're skipping a lot of text, we actually just do an ellipsis. And then he says, again, right from the text, I'm going back to double check to make sure I get exactly. Never saw you before. Where are you from? And then going on to page 140, says, what's that under your coat? And now I know this is what I was telling you about. These words don't line up exactly like this in the text, but that's why when you're quoting from the text, if you want to skip some words, you can actually just put 3 dots here, and that lets the reader know that you're not copying, you're copying some of the exact words from the text, but that you're skipping a lot to prove your point. Great. And again, I think he is important to the story in the same way the blacksmith is. He shows that Ellen is very committed, again, committed, 2 T's, to completing her mission, because no matter how many times he asks, yikes, he asks, she doesn't reveal who she is or what she's doing so that she can complete her mission without being stopped. And there we go. If your description looked like this, where you described what the character was like, how they acted toward Ellen, and then also why they're important to the story, mostly from these characters of what they revealed about Ellen, then you gave a very good response. Again, you didn't have to do either or both, but if you had your blacksmith like this or a tall man like that, then you did a really nice job. Let's dive into our closing thoughts. Do you think the blacksmith and the tall man want to fight for freedom? Explain. You can take a minute to think about it on your own and pause the video. When you come back, I think it's unclear about what they want, so you can say yes or no to this. I think there's some evidence that maybe they are freedom fighters, because the blacksmith says that he says that things have gotten worse since the British have come and that people are stealing everything. So he could be against the British, or that could just be him saying that people are acting very badly and he doesn't like them. So I'm not sure if they would be fighting for freedom. The tall man doesn't seem like he's someone that would. He seems like, or maybe he is, because that's why he's so curious. He wants to figure out if Ellen's on his side or not. So maybe. It's hard to tell what you think. And then down here it says, what more do we learn about ways to feel less afraid? This is completely up to you. From Ellen, I learned that she used her grandfather's words to help her be brave in a time that was challenging. And so that tells me that I can also think about people who influence me, people who I look up to, people who I know are brave, and think about the words that they've used to encourage me, to encourage myself in challenging times. And so I hope you took something away from that like that. All right. So I hope that was a lesson that helped you become better at inferring character traits. If it's something that you can continue to practice with, we'll see it in a few other lessons, and also feel free to check in on the Zoom meetings and we can talk more about it together. Otherwise, thanks for checking the video. Be safe, and we'll see you on the next lesson.